This recording is one of a series that provides further guidance on the assessments for the units of the Associate Diploma. This recording focuses on 5 CO01 Organisational Performance and Culture in Practice. Assessments are revised on a regular basis, and this guidance is based on the June 2024 version. The last moderation window for this assessment is September 2025. This assessment contains 12 questions that assess 12 assessment criteria, also referred to as ACs. The overall word count for the assessment for this unit is 4,550 words, plus or minus 10%. Therefore, the maximum word count for this assessment is 5,005 words. Any assessment that exceeds 5,005 words will be rejected for marking, returned to you, and counted as a refer. You will then be allowed to resubmit your assessment in line with the CIPD referral policy. To ensure full coverage of all ACs, this means approximately 380 words can be allocated to answering each AC. Your response to this assessment should be submitted in a Word document. This assessment does not require a particular format, such as a report or briefing paper, but each question and related AC reference should be presented along with the answer to the question. It is only the answers to the questions that are included in the word count for this assessment. The example on the slide shows how you can present the question number, the question itself, and the AC reference, followed by the answer. It's important to manage word count as you go in order to ensure that you do not exceed the maximum word count. Question 1 asks you to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of both a divisional structure and a matrix structure. Within the evaluation, you should include the reasons underpinning each structure. It is important to answer the question set, so you should ensure you focus on divisional and matrix structures. If you write about different structures, your answer cannot pass. You should take each structure in turn and briefly explain the structure and the reasons underpinning that structure. Then evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of that structure. You should resist the temptation to simply identify advantages and disadvantages. Question 2 asks you to analyse the extent to which the organisational strategy in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar helps to ensure products or services meet customers' needs. Before you can answer this question, you need to decide which organisation to focus on. It could be an organisation where you currently work or one that you've worked in previously. It may be an organisation that you're familiar with because a friend or a family member works there. You can then start to think about strategy in a little bit more detail. And you might want to think about the 3 core areas of strategy: strategy analysis, strategy development, and strategy implementation. You also need to be familiar with what products and/or services your chosen organisation offers and to which customers. Once you've done this, you can start to address the question. You can then start to analyse the extent to which the organisational strategy helps to ensure products or services meet customers' needs. When you analyse, you may find that the strategy is or isn't particularly effective in helping to ensure customer needs are met. Question 3 asks you to analyse the current impact of interest rates, inflation, and one other external factor on your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar. You should then identify organisational priorities that arise from this analysis. This question focuses on external factors and the impact of these. You should start by considering which other external factor to focus on. It is important to choose an external factor rather than an internal factor. When analysing the current impact of interest rates and inflation, you should write about these separately. You could show knowledge of the current rates and analyse the impact of these in your organisation. You could consider why the rates are at the current level as part of your analysis. You could consider whether the impact of these rates is positive, neutral or negative, short-term or long-term, significant or insignificant. It is important to identify any organisational priorities that arise because of these external factors. A similar approach can then be taken with the other external factor that you choose to add. In question 4, you're asked to assess the extent that AI is or could be used in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar, and to assess how AI impacts work in that organisation. The command verb in this question is assess. To assess, you should evaluate or judge the importance of an issue and make available information and use available information to make a reasoned judgment. In assessing the extent that AI is used in your organisation, you could consider what AI is currently used for. If it is not used, you could consider how it could be used. It is important to address the second part of the question too, by assessing how AI impacts work. For all questions that are based on your organisation or one that you know well, you should use the same named organisation. Question 5 asks you to explain Charles Handy's model of organisational culture and to explain David Rock's scarf theory. When answering this question, it's important to address both parts, and first you're guided to explain Charles Handy's model of culture and second, scarf theory. Although this question is straightforward, it is important as always to use your own words to show your knowledge and understanding. There are many websites that provide explanations of these theories, but it is important to read and reference credible sources in your answer. Question 6 provides you with a choice. You're asked to assess how employee selection or employee development impacts organisational culture and behaviour in your organisation or one with which you are familiar. Therefore, you need to decide whether you want to focus on employee selection or employee development. You then need to assess how that chosen activity impacts culture and behaviour in your organisation. We now move from culture to change. In question 7, you are asked to explain how Kotter's approach to managing change could be used to successfully implement the move from home working to working at least 2 days a week on site. It is important to show knowledge of all 8 stages of Kotter's model, but it is not enough just to explain the model. You need to show how the stages can be used in managing the change that's set out within the question. In other words, a move to working at least 2 days a week on site. It is important to include citations to show where you have read about Kotter's model. It's not enough just to use Kotter's name in the answer. Question 8 requires you to discuss how change is experienced but the vehicle for doing this is through the Kubler-Ross change curve. It is therefore essential that wider reading from credible sources informs your answer, as good knowledge of the Kubler-Ross change curve is needed. Question 9 asks you to assess the importance of well-being at work and assess how good work could impact well-being. To assess, you should evaluate or judge the importance of an issue and use available information to make a reasoned judgment. Here, the focus is on well-being, so you should evaluate or judge the importance of well-being at work. You could consider the importance of well-being from both the employer and the employee's perspective. The second part of the question asks you to assess how good work could impact well-being. To answer this part of the question, you need to have knowledge of the concept of good work. The CIPD provides a definition of and examples of good work on their website, so this is a good starting place when considering wider reading. In question 10, you need to provide a brief overview of the employee life cycle and discuss people practice roles at the recruitment, development and separation stages of the life cycle. You need to show knowledge of all stages of the life cycle, but you don't want a lengthy description of the whole life cycle because the focus is on discussing people practice roles at the recruitment, development and separation stages. Question 11 asks you to analyse how people practice supports organisational strategy through vertical integration and how people practice supports wider people strategies through horizontal integration. The terms vertical and horizontal integration have different meanings in different contexts, so it is important to check your knowledge and understanding of the terms before answering this question. You should focus on these terms in the context of HR strategy rather than growth strategies and merger and acquisitions. Question 12 has a little scenario. An organisation is planning to introduce a 4-day working week. You're asked to discuss the processes the people function could use to consult and engage with managers and employees to understand their needs when moving from a 5-day to 4-day working week. So this question is asking you to discuss the processes that could be used rather than whether they should or should not go ahead with the change. You could write about processes such as using focus groups, surveys, interviews, meetings, or any other activity where consultation and engagement could take place. And it should be clear why those processes are suitable to use. Before we close, I would like to emphasise the need to apply wider reading to inform each answer and to include references to reliable sources to show evidence of this reading. We have now reached the end of the webinar. Thank you for listening. Webinars are also available for the other units of the Associate Diploma.